Welcome back to Remnants of the Veil, Episode 19. There are worlds in the Iron March that were never built to be fought over. Korrach is one of them. It sits where two old trade routes cross, routes laid before the Compact's charter, before the Iron Hall raised its first dais, before the Drakkar Dominion was a name and not a hunger. A junction world. Cargo world. The kind of place a warship moves through without slowing. The skies above Korrach have carried more grain than ordnance, more ore than fire. For most of its long industrial life, Clan Drennach has prospered not by fighting the Compact's wars, but by carrying them, by supplying the corridors others bled to hold. The yards on Korrach are modest by Kaval's standard. They build at a measured pace. Keels are laid clean and plating is read twice. The clan that flies from Korrach has never been famous and has never wanted to be. Famous warlords die in the arena at Vorkath. Patient warlords die in their own beds. Clan Drennach is on its third warlord of the current Compact tenure. The other clans are on their first. The command level of the Drennach Citadel is unlike anything else in the Compact. Where Cathara is stone laid by ceremony, where Kaval is poured under cutting torches in the constant night shift, where Skethal is scoured silence, Korrach is records. Walls of indexed slates, floor plates, inlaid with the roots of the trade lanes carved into them so that the men who walk them learn the geography under their feet. The air smells of dry parchment and warm amber lamp oil. Sound carries. Voices are pitched accordingly, low, measured, audible to the room and no further. Warlord Korrach of Clan Drennach stood in the small chamber that opened off the command floor, the chamber his predecessor had used as a reading room, and read the message a third time. The challenge transmission was 11 lines of formal Drakkar correspondence. Every warlord knew the form. The opening phrase, the date stamped by Compact reckoning, the lane designation, the closing seal. The architecture of a declaration drawn so old that the first version of it predated the Iron Hall itself. Warlord Veskaar of Clan Vesk reaches for the Hadrann Approach. The lane was Drennach's, not by claim, by the older method, by the long habit of carrying. The Hadrann Approach was an ungarrisoned feeder corridor that ran from the outer Vesk lanes toward the inner Drennach lattice. Drennach had never garrisoned it because Drennach had never needed to. The traffic on Hadrann was Drennach traffic. The convoys were Drennach convoys. The clan that owned the lane in practice did not need to own it in the Compact's ledger. That was the follower's method. Owning what one used, letting the ledger lag. He read the transmission a fourth time, not because he had missed anything in the first three, but because this was a habit older than his title. Warlord Korrach found that reading a thing 4 times was the only way to be certain one was reading what was written and not what one expected to be written. The closing seal was Veskaar's personal seal. The transmission carried his name, not a captain's, not a senior commander's. The reach for Sevrokk had carried Senior Captain Tarock's name in the field operations, although Veskaar's seal had been on the challenge itself. The reach for Hadrann carried both seals. Veskaar at the top of the record, Veskaar at the bottom, Veskaar on every line between. Warlord Korrach set the slate down on the reading table, slowly, both hands, the way a man sets down a piece of evidence. He intends to refer to again? And looked at the door. His attendant was waiting beyond it. Had been waiting, by the cadence of the breath he could half hear, for the better part of an hour. He found that he was tired. He had inherited the warlord's mantle of Clan Drennach when his predecessor's heart finally stopped, quietly, in the same reading chamber between one cup of bark tea and the next. Warlord Veskaar had ruled Clan Drennach for 51 years. He had never put his name on a battle record, not once, not in the Voron border negotiations of his 11th year, not in the punitive engagements of the 20s, not in the long, patient corridor disputes of his 40s. He had commanded his clan through 51 years of compact politics by being a warlord whose name was nowhere, and a clan that everyone counted on. Vesk had taught Korrach the method by living it and by saying on the rare occasions when he said anything at all, the same line. The seat at the back is the only one that sees every door. Korrach had spent 30 years in that seat. He had liked it. He opened the door. His attendant straightened. "Send for the inner circle," Warlord Korrach said. "All of them. The reading room." The attendant inclined his head and went. Korrach stood a moment longer in the doorway, then turned back to the table and picked the slate up again. He read it a 5th time. The challenge transmission was still 11 lines. The closing seal was still Veskaar's. Hadrann was still being reached for. His name would be on the record this time. He could see it now before he had even given the order. The 11-page draft that would arrive in his hand a week from now, his seal at the top, his command at every page. The thing his predecessor had spent half a century not doing. The II East follower had been read. The follower would have to stop following now, or be paid for by his own men. The reading room held 7 when it held its full circle. Tonight it would hold 6. Senior Commander Karvek had been ordered directly from Voron to Hadrann by separate transmission that morning. Korrach's command authority delegated under Senior Captain's authority. Voron held under standing garrison protocol in his absence, 2nd rank oversight, no name on the order. Karvek would not reach Korath in time for this council, and Korrach had not waited. He laid the slate flat on the long reading table where Warlord Vesk had laid every important document of his 51-year tenure. The wood was scarred with the marks of 51 years of slates and styluses. Korrach watched the inner circle read the challenge in the order they always read things. Elder Veskaar first, because he was the oldest. Senior Captain Drovrak, second because he was the loudest. The others by seniority after. When all 6 had read it, no one spoke. The reading room had a tradition older than Korrach's tenure. The warlord spoke first or last, never in the middle. Vesk had always spoken last. Korrach had always spoken last as well. Tonight he intended to speak last. Elder Veskaar lifted his head. Veskaar had been Vesk's senior advisor for 31 years and Korrach's for 15. He was older than the warlord he served by a decade. His plating had gone the deep, dull gray of long age. His voice when he used it was quiet because age had taken what age took. Warlord, may I speak, Elder? Veskaar laid his hand flat on the slate. Proxy this. As we proxied Sevrokk. The room received the words. Senior Captain Drovrak's jaw worked once and stilled. The others did not move. Veskaar has reached past the position he can hold, Veskaar said. Sevrokk cost him a lead cruiser and a green hull that failed cold. Hadrann will cost him more. Let it cost him more. Send the minimum we sent to Sevrokk. Let the corridor be expensive. Let his yards drain. The compact will tire of him before Voron starves. That has always been our principle. It is still our principle. Veskaar lifted his hand from the slate. We are the follower, Warlord. The follower carries. The follower bleeds where bleeding is cheaper than fighting. We have prospered for 60 years on this principle. Vesk prospered for 51. The principle has not failed us yet. It is not failing us now. The patient voice. The voice Korrach had heard at every difficult table for 15 years. He listened to all of it because he respected the man speaking, and because some of it was true. Senior Captain Drovrak did not wait for his turn. He had never been good at waiting his turn. He was 63 years old, and his bone plating still ran the dark, polished black of middle age, and his voice, when he used it, was a thing that had not learned to be quiet. Warlord, with the Elder's permission. He did not have the Elder's permission. The Elder gave him a look that said so. Drovrak did not see the look or chose not to see it. Take Voron back. The room held still. End the geometry, Drovrak said. We hold Voron. We hold it badly. The core is purged. The claim belongs to no one. The lane is hollow. Veskaar reached for Sevrokk because we held Voron hollow. He reaches for Hadrann because we hold Voron hollow. He will reach for the next feeder and the next until the lane structure he has built around Voron is more real than our claim. and then he will take Voron whole. Or worse, he will take it through us, by forcing us to defend. Hollow ground until our forces are spent. End the geometry. Reauthorize Voron or release it. Hold a real claim or hold none. Hadrann is not the question. Voron is the question. Sevrokk set both his hands flat on the table as if to keep them from doing anything else. That is not a small thing to say, Warlord. I know it. I say it anyway. Elder Veskaar closed his eyes. He did not open them again until Sevrokk had finished. When he did open them, he said only, "The senior captain is brave. He is also wrong." "I am brave," Sevrokk said. "I am not wrong. Brave men are often wrong, senior captain. That is the nature of bravery. And patient men—" "Speak in your turn, senior captain." Sevrokk stopped. He did not apologize. Korrach watched him not apologize and noted it. A long quiet. The other four in the inner circle were waiting. They were going to keep waiting. Korrach looked at Veskaar. Veskaar was his sister's son. He was 41, which was young for the inner circle. He held no formal title. He sat in the room because Korrach had asked him to sit in it 3 years ago, and he had not been asked to leave. He had a captain's commission on the corvette Drennach that he had not flown in those 3 years. He sat in the reading room instead and read what the room and said what the room said when it asked him. The room had not asked him. Korrach asked him. Veskaar. His sister's son looked up. "Speak." Veskaar did not speak immediately. He was the youngest in the room, and he had always taken longer to begin than the others. Not because he thought more, slowly, but because he did not begin to speak until he had decided exactly what he intended to say. "Uncle," the kinform carried in the room. The room did not flinch from it. Inside the inner circle behind the closed door, the kinform was permitted. Veskaar had used it perhaps thrice in 3 years. He used it now to mark what came next. The two, "Elder is right. The senior captain is right. They are both right and they are both arguing the wrong question." The elder's eyes returned to him. Sevrok's jaw worked. "The question is not whether we proxy Hadrann. The question is whether we can afford to be read as a clan that proxies Hadrann after Sevrokk. Sevrokk was read in the lane channels. Tarok's transmission about the Hragkan is in the archive. The Vesk battle record names our holding force. We were named, Uncle. For the first time since Dravask took the seat, Clan Drennach was named in a battle record as the clan that bled to defend a thing. Drennach was named. The Korrach was named. The losses were named. We were on the page." He paused for breath. He was the only one in the room young enough to need the breath. If we proxy Hadrann after that, if we send the minimum and the minimum, bleeds out and Veskaar takes the lane and another battle record carries our losses with no warlord's seal at the top, the compact will not read us as patient. The compact will read us as a clan that can be reached at and cannot answer. That is a different read. That is the read that ends our tenure. Veskaar's voice did not lift. The Drakkar he was speaking to was his uncle and his warlord, and a man who had taught him at 6 years old that volume was for warriors and clarity was for everyone else. A follower who bleeds is a follower. The room begins to read differently. We are being read, Uncle. We were read at Sevrokk. We will be read again at Hadrann, whatever we do. If we send the minimum, we will be read as weak. If we send a real defense without your name on it, we will be read as hiding. If we send a real defense with your name on it, we will be read as having stopped being the follower. That is also a read. It is not a good read, but it is a read we choose." He stopped. He had said it. He looked once around the room and then down at his hands. The silence after held longer than any silence Korrach could remember in that room. Elder Veskaar said finally, "He is too young to know what he is saying." "He knows what he is saying." Korrach said. The elder's eyes closed again. "Warlord, once, with your permission, the formal construction." Veskaar had never used it. In 15 years he had given his counsel in plain speech and let Korrach take or leave it. He had never asked for the single objection right. "Speak it, Elder. If you put your name on this battle record, you cannot remove it. You cannot take—" it back next year by being patient again. The clan is what its warlord is. If you stop being the follower, we stop being the follower's clan. We are not the follower's clan in the Compact's eyes after this. We are something else. I do not know what we become. I know what we cease to be. Once, warlord, and then I execute. Korrach took the elders once. He took it whole. He took the weight of 51 years of Dravask's seat being unread. He took the weight of 15 years of Veskaar counseling that seat by being unread. He took the weight of his own 30 years in the seat at the back of the table. He took the weight of every door it had let him see while no door looked at him. He laid the elders once on the table beside the slate. He said, Sevrokk, recall the second-tier formations from the inner lattice. Pull the heavy elements from the E. Korath garrison, we commit a Drakast-class lead, 2 Vorath-class flanks, 3 Kael'thor-class line, and a Gorvak warp breaker in reserve at the lane mouth. Karvek commands under senior captain's authority. The warlord remains on Korath. The record carries my seal. Sevrokk did not speak. He set his palms flat on the table and held them there. Korrach turned to Veskaar. Elder, warlord, you will go to Hadrann. The room did not breathe. You will go because if my name is on this record, I will not have it said that I sent only the young to the lane. The Compact will see an elder of Clan Drennach in the formation. They will see the patient voice gone with the patient method. Both. Together. That is the reed I choose. Veskaar's gray plating did not move. He had been a captain once, decades before the reading table. He understood being sent. Warlord. As you order. Korrach picked up the slate. He held it a moment, looking at Veskaar's seal at the bottom of the challenge. He set it down. That is all. Sevrokk. Prepare the orders. Veskaar, stay. The room emptied. Veskaar left last. He did not look back. When the door closed, Korrach looked at his sister's son. Why did you let me do it? Because you would have done it without me, uncle. I just told you what you already knew. Veskaar will not come back. No, uncle. He knows that. He has known it since the senior captain spoke. Korrach looked at the door Veskaar had walked through. Go, he said. Tell the signal officer to draft the response. Closed channel acceptance. My seal. Veskaar stood. At the door he paused. Uncle. The seat at the back. Yes. It saw the door. That was its principle. Tonight you walked through one. He left. The Hadrann Approach is not a lane in the way the inner lattice is a lane. It is a gap. 2 old shipping corridors run parallel through the outer Drennach traffic belt, and the Hadrann Approach is the corridor between them, the slack space. The traffic uses to cross when one corridor is congested and the other is clear. It carries no fixed sensor array. It has no transit control platform. It was never built. It accumulated. Drennach convoys had used it for so long that the Compact Ledger eventually granted it a name and let the lane sit unclaimed. 3 days after Warlord Veskaar's seal arrived on Korath. 3 days after Warlord Korrach's seal arrived on Kaaval in answer, Clan Vesk reached for it. Warlord Korrach received the engagement the way he had received all engagements in his tenure. In the small command room off the reading floor, alone, with the transmissions filtering in raw and unedited. He had never sat at the command rail of a flagship. He had not commanded from a deck in 31 years. Warlord Veskaar had taught him that the warlord who reads a battle after the fact reads it better than the warlord who fought it, and Korrach had accepted the teaching because it suited his temperament, which suited the teaching, which was how teachings became principles in Clan Drennach. The first transmission came at the 14th minute. It was Senior Commander Karvek's voice. Korrach knew Karvek's voice the way a man knows the voice of a son he raised. Karvek had taken Voron under Korrach's authority and had brought back the Voron record clean, and now Karvek's voice came in over the closed channel, low and even, reporting the contact. Vesk forward at the lane mouth. 5 Vorath class, 2 Kael'thor class, a Drakast class lead, confirmed at the 17th minute. The Drakast was the Skenvar. Korrach noted it, set it aside, returned to Karvek's voice. Karvek's voice was the only thing that mattered. Senior Commander Korrach deployed in the doctrine Korrach had named in the order. Heavy elements forward, lane mouth contested at the geometry's narrowest point, the Gorvak warp breaker held back at the second mouth to seal the warp path if the engagement broke open. Real tonnage, real doctrine, not the proxy posture. The first Vesk volley arrived at the 23rd minute. Korrach received it in fragments, Korrach's voice cutting in over the channel, an audio spike from the Drennach-class Drennach's bridge, a secondary transmission from one of the Vorath flanks. The volley had been heavier than Sevrokk's opening. Veskaar had not sent his second string this time. He had sent his weight. Korrach stood. He had been sitting because Dravask had taught him that the warlord who stands during a battle he is not in is a warlord performing for his own men. He stood now because the Drennach had just taken a forward hit and Korrach's voice had paused for the first time in 23 minutes. The pause ended. Korrach's voice resumed at the count he was supposed to resume at, and the doctrine continued. And the engagement entered its second phase. Korrach sat down again because the moment had passed and Dravask had also taught him that the warlord who stands twice in a battle has decided to be in it. The transmissions came in a slower, more textured cadence after that. Korrach found he could read them the way Dravask had taught him to read trade reports, for the rhythm, not the words. The rhythm at the 31st minute said holding. The rhythm at the 38th minute said bleeding. The rhythm at the 44th minute said the line is moving. The line was moving inward. The Vesk reach was being prosecuted, as Sevrokk had been prosecuted by Senior Captain Tarok on the Vornok. Tarok's Vornok had limped back from Sevrokk venting atmosphere from a flank wound and her command crew down a third, and she had been repaired in 6 days at the Kaval yards under Warlord Veskaar's personal authority, which was a thing the Compact had not seen a flag repaired under since the early Compact wars. Tarok was 60 years of border duty and the man Veskaar trusted to take a reach without his warlord on the rail. Senior Captain Tarok was reading Korrach's geometry now. Tarok was reading it correctly. Warlord Korrach listened to his senior. Commander be read by a senior captain he had never met in person. The thing he noticed, and he noticed it 3 times because he was Dravask's student and Dravask had taught him to notice, was that Korrach's losses were holding, not light, not minimal, holding. The Vorath-class Drenkor took a flank round at the 51st minute that should have ended her. She bled atmosphere from a starboard breach for 16 minutes and continued firing. The Dracus-class Drennach took 2 forward hits at the 57th minute and continued firing. Real defense, real losses. The hollow geometry Drovrak had warned of was being made expensive, but the cost of making it expensive was being paid in Drennach plating, not in Drennach ground. At the 61st minute, Korrach's voice cut in low and even. Bridge of the Drennach secondary breach, amber on the deck, holding station. Korrach noted the time on the slate. At the 64th minute, Korrach's voice said, Tarok is positioning to take the lane mouth. At the 68th minute, Korrach's voice said, I am ordering the Gorvak in. Korrach received the order on Tsai, the closed channel, and did not amend it. The warlord remained on Korath. The senior commander commanded the line. Korrach had senior captain's authority, and Korrach had given him the doctrine, and the doctrine was that the Gorvak went in when the lane mouth was at risk of being taken. The lane mouth was at risk of being taken. The Gorvak went in. The Gorvak warp breaker was the Korvask. She was an old hull, older than 3 of the line cruisers around her, older than the Vorath-class Drenkor that was bleeding atmosphere through her starboard plating, older than Korrach himself. She had warp-broken corridors in the early Compact wars and had been refit twice since. She was not the sharpest piece of the formation. She was the piece that could close a warp path. She closed it. She closed it at the 73rd minute, and the Vesk reach for Hadrann shifted geometry, and Tarok adjusted, and the engagement entered the phase that decided it. Korrach received Elder Vraskor's transmission at the 79th minute. It was a single line. Korrach's elder was aboard. The Korvask. Korrach had put him there himself. Warlord, the lane mouth is held. I execute as ordered. The signal cut. Korrach noted the time on the slate beside the transmission log. He did not move from his seat. The lane mouth being held was good. Veskaar cutting his transmission was less good. Korrach had served in Dravask's reading room long, enough to know what an elder's last transmission sounded like when the elder did not yet know it was his last. The engagement continued. What Warlord Korrach reconstructed, in the 4 days that followed, was this. Senior Captain Sevrokk of Clan Vesk took the Hadrann Approach at the 94th minute by ordering a forward push through the Drenkor's bleeding starboard quarter that cost him a Kael'thor-class line, vessel and the forward gunspine of the Vorath-class Drennach. The Drenkor was lost with her captain and 341 warriors. The Drakast-class Drennach was lost in the secondary phase, broken amidships by a Vesk siege round that Karvek read coming and did not move in time to avoid. Karvek survived. Karvek made it back to the second mouth in the corvette Drennach, Hragkan's commission, ironically. The corvette had been in the formation at Korrach's order, and Karvek transferred to her when the Drennach's bridge was lost. The Korvask did not return. She closed the warp path and she held it closed, and the Vesk did not break it. Her crew was lost. Elder Veskaar was lost. The lane was Veskaar's. The battle record draft arrived in Warlord Korrach's hand 4 days after the engagement, brought by the Drennach's signal officer because Senior Commander Karvek had not yet returned from the second mouth. It was a 43-page record. Korrach's seal was on the top page. Korrach's seal was on every page after. The Vesk record would carry Warlord Veskaar's seal in the same fashion. The 2 records would enter the compact archive on the same day, would be read by the same 3 other warlords on the morning after, and would say what they said. Vesk took Hadrann. Drennach defended. Drennach defended for the first time in the compact's current tenure under the seal of its own warlord. Drennach defended at a cost the record carried in its own column. Korrach read the casualty page first. He had learned to read the casualty page first from Dravask, who had said, "The man who reads the strategic summary before the casualty page is a man who does not yet understand what he ordered." The casualty page on Hadrann ran 2 pages. The names were in formation order. Korrach read the formation order. The Drenkor had lost 341. The Drennach had lost 212. The Vorath-class Korravask had lost 48. The line ships had lost smaller numbers, distributed cleanly across the formation. The Korvask had lost 187. Elder Veskaar's name was the 3rd on the Korvask's list. The first 2 were the Korvask's captain and her senior officer. Veskaar was listed by his elder's rank, Elder of Clan Drennach, counselor to the warlord, because that was the rank he had carried aboard. The line beside his name was blank. It was blank because no one had written what came after. Whoever had drafted the record had reached the blank and had not filled it. Korrach filled it. He took the stylus from the table and he wrote, in the small space beside his elder's name, "Executed as ordered." He set the stylus down. He stood. He walked the length of the reading room, slowly, both hands clasped behind his back, the way Dravask had walked the reading room when he was alone and reading. The casualty pages of the long corridor disputes of his 40th year. He walked it 3 times. He stopped at the wall on the 3rd pass. The wall held no weapons. It held a slate. The slate was indexed to the trade routes of Korath's inner lattice, and it had been on the wall since before Dravask's tenure, and Korrach looked at it now because he had no other place to look. He thought about Veskaar. He thought about Veskaar not the way a son thinks of a father, because Veskaar had not been his father. Not the way a warlord thinks of an elder, because the warlord's grief is not Veskaar's measure. He thought about the man who had stood in 15 reading rooms with him and had given his counsel in plain speech for 15 years and had asked for the single objection right one time and had been sent to a warp breaker because the warlord he had counseled had needed an elder named in the formation. He thought, "I sent him." He thought, he knew. He thought, he said it himself. He said once, "Warlord, and then I execute." He did not think anything else. The reading table held an absence. Veskaar had sat at its left side for 15 years, in the seat that had been his under Vesk before that, and the seat was a piece of wood whose grain Veskaar had worn smooth in two places, under his right elbow and under his left palm, where age had made him lean. Korrach had not sat at the table since the record arrived. He had sat at the writing stand. He sat there now because the table held a worn place he was not yet ready to look at. He returned to the writing stand. He read the rest, the tactical pages, the strategic summary last. The strategic summary was a paragraph. The paragraph said what the engagement had said. The Drennach line had been held until the 73rd minute. The lane mouth had been held by the Korvask's warp path closure until the 79th. The lane had been taken at the 94th at a cost the Vesk had not paid at Sevrokk. Korrach added one line to the strategic summary. He added it under his own seal. In the formal construction Vesk had used 3 times in 51 years, for the things that were not in the doctrine but were in the Warlord's word. Clan Drennach defended the Hadrann Approach by order of its warlord, named on this record. That was the line. That was what he had bought with the Korvask and Veskaar and the Drenkor and the Drennach and the 341 and the 212 and the 187. It was not enough. It was what he had. He had also noted on the 3rd tactical page a paragraph he had not yet decided what to do with. The paragraph reported that the Vorath-class Vrenoth, Vesk, lost in the forward push, had broken along a forward seam that the Drennach gunner who put the round in her had not aimed at and could not account for. The Vrenoth had been a green hull. Her plating had failed in a manner consistent with the Hragkan at Sevrokk. The paragraph noted it and did not say more. Korrach read the paragraph twice. He thought about the lane channels carrying Tarock's Sevrokk transmission. He thought about 3 warlords reading the Hadrann record on the morning after it entered the archive and finding that paragraph in it. He thought about leaving it in. He left it in. He sealed the record. The signal officer left with the sealed record at the hour Korrach was supposed to take his evening meal. Korrach did not take his evening meal. He sat in the reading room with the slate of the challenge transmission, Veskaar's 11 lines, the seal at the bottom, on one side of the reading table and the draft of his response, Korrach's 2 lines, his seal at the bottom, on the other side. He had not yet ordered the response carried to the signal floor. He was reading the response. He had read it 4 times. He read it a 5th. The door opened. Veskaar came in without being announced. That was new. Veskaar had not entered the reading room without being announced in 3 years. He had not been announced just now because the attendant beyond the door had let him in without announcement, and the attendant had done that because Veskaar had told him to, and the attendant had taken the order from Veskaar because Veskaar was the warlord's sister's son and had been to a reading room with him 3 times in 3 weeks, and the attendant had read the pattern. Korrach noted it. He did not mention it. Veskaar stood at the door a moment, looking at his uncle. Then he came forward to the reading table and looked at the response draft beside the challenge transmission. He did not pick it up. Karvek arrives tomorrow. I know. He will want to be at this table when he does. I know. Veskaar stood another moment. He had not yet asked the question he had come to ask. Korrach watched him not ask it. Uncle, speak. Veskaar will reach again. It was not a question. Korrach treated it as one. He will. He has committed his name twice. The compact will. Read him as a warlord who reaches. Reaching is now his method. He cannot stop reaching without being read as a warlord who has stopped. He will reach a 3rd time, I do not yet know where. What will you do? That depends on where. It does not, uncle. Korrach looked at his sister's son. Veskaar did not look away. The kinform was permitted in the reading room when the door was closed, and the door was closed, and Veskaar was using it now in a way he had not used it before. The Drakkar word for uncle was a kin rank older than the compact charter. It carried no formal authority. It carried only the weight of who had raised whom, and who had taught whom, and who had sat at whose table. It was carrying that weight now. Veskaar was using it deliberately. What will you do? Veskaar said again. I will defend. You will defend with your name. Yes. Each time. Yes. You have changed, Uncle. Korrach received the line. He sat with it. He could have said the situation has changed, which was the answer Vesk would have given. He could have said the seat at the back no longer sees every door, which was the answer that was true. He could have said Veskaar reached too far and forced my hand, which was the answer. The compact would write into the chronicle when Korrach's tenure was over. He said none of these. He said, yes. Veskaar did not move. He was looking at his uncle the way he had looked at him when his uncle had taught him to read trade reports at 6 years old. The way a son looks at a father whose face has just done something the son had not yet seen. The father's face do. It was not contempt. It was not disrespect. It was something else. It was the look of a man who had just registered that the room he had grown up in was a different room than it had been an hour ago. Korrach saw the look. He recognized it because he had given it himself once, decades ago, to Vesk, when Vesk had ordered something Vesk would never have ordered. The seam in his clan showed in his sister's son's face. Korrach saw it. Veskaar knew Korrach had seen it. Neither of them spoke. After a long quiet, Veskaar said, I will carry the record to the signal floor, Uncle, if you will permit it. Permitted. Veskaar took the sealed record from the table. At the door he paused. Uncle. Yes. The seat at the back. The principal. Will we still teach it? Korrach thought about it. Teach it, he said. Then teach what it cost. Veskaar inclined his head and went. The door closed. Warlord Korrach of Clan Drennach sat in his reading room with the challenge transmission on the table, and the response no longer beside it, and the casualty page of the Hadrann record committed to memory. He sat a long while. He did not open the door. In the small courtyard beyond the reading room's outer wall, the courtyard where Vesk had kept a single bark tea tree for the last 20 years of his tenure, and which Korrach had not let the gardeners cut down, the tree was in its winter cycle. Its branches were bare. The lamp oil scent of the command floor did not reach the courtyard. The courtyard had its own smell. It smelled of dry bark and cold stone. The warlord did not visit it that night. He sat in the reading room until the next. Signal arrived from Kaval, Warlord Veskaar's acknowledgement that the Hadrann record had been received, and that he had read it, and that he had seen Warlord Korrach's seal on every page. The acknowledgement carried Warlord Veskaar's seal alone. Korrach. Read it once. He had been read. He set it on the table beside the others. He did not yet know where Veskaar would reach next. He did not yet know what he would do when Veskaar reached. He knew only that he could not be the man he had been an hour ago, and could not be the man Vesk had taught him to be, and could not retreat into the seat at the back of the table, and that his sister's son had seen it, and that the inner circle had seen it, and that the compact would see it on the morning after tomorrow. The follower had stopped following. What he became now was the question he had not yet answered. He stood. He walked, slowly, both hands clasped behind his back, the length of the reading room. And at the end of it, instead of turning back, he opened the door to the courtyard, and he stepped into the cold, and he stood beneath the bare bark tea tree, and for the first time in his warlord's tenure, he let himself be seen standing, in a place no one had expected to find him. End of episode 19. And thank you for listening.